Well, welcome. As many of you know, I got back into flying in 2004 after a 25-year hiatus. Two things that changed significantly between 1979 and 2004 was one, my risk profile, and two, the technology I found in the airplane. From a risk profile perspective, I guess I realized I was not immortal, and now that I had a family, I needed to take a much more conservative approach to my flying, which I felt at the time meant a smarter approach. But when the conservatism resulted in me making a lot of no-go decisions, it really frustrated me. It took some time, but I learned that I could get more utility out of the plane by building proficiency and confidence, which resulted in more go decisions and ironically reduced my risk. Check out my go, no-go video link in the description below. As part of that increased proficiency, I learned a lot about aircraft systems, including the avionics. Even though I didn't have an instrument rating back in 2004, I still used the GPS to help me plan my VNAV profiles, my vertical descents and such. Like everyone else, I took the altitude I had to lose, divided by 500 foot per minute, and compared it to the remaining mileage to my destination to know when I should start down. But I kept running into a gotcha, and that was when I approached my destination, the GPS would show that I still had another 40 to 50 miles to go, even though I could see it was about 10 to 20 miles in front of me. I finally figured it out. At some point in the flight, I would load an approach into the Garmin 430s back then in 2004, and I used a vector to final approach. And the reason why I did all of this was to ensure that I was lining up with the correct runway. But what I didn't realize is that the Garmin automatically adds a 30-mile line aligned with the final approach course and adds that to the distance. Well, guess what? Things haven't changed much. I now fly the Garmin Perspective, which is the G1000 variant for the Cirrus. As you see here, I have a course between my present position to Rockford, Illinois, Romeo Fox Delta. Now the mileage shown to the airport, which, by the way, when you see on a GPS mileage to an airport, they're going to the middle of the airport, so you usually have to add a half a mile. But in this case, it's 36.6 miles. Now, if I load an approach, in this case, let's go ahead and load the RNAV GPS 25 with vectors to final. Note that as soon as I press load the approach, it adds 35 miles to the trip, now showing just over 71 miles. And if I don't use vector to final, but rather pick a specific initial approach fix and load the approach, you'll see it jump from its current 36 miles from the airport to now showing 60 miles to that destination, an additional 24 miles. What is going on? Well, understanding the operation of the equipment makes all the difference in the world. The answer is found on the FPL page, the flight plan. When going to the flight plan page, you'll see a listing of your waypoints along with the mileage, which, by the way, has two different ways of showing the mileage, either as leg-to-leg mileage or as cumulative mileage. And the way to change between those two is to press the view button and either cum or leg-to-leg button. So each of those legs has a mileage associated with it. So why does the mileage jump so high when choosing vectors to final? Well, my assumption, and I believe this has got to be the case, is that the GPS receiver cannot know where ATC will vector you onto the final approach course, so Garmin adds this 30 to 35 mile final approach course line, which adds that to your distance to the airport. So seeing in the 430s over 15 years ago and then seeing it with the Cirrus Perspective, I wasn't sure if it was the same for the G1000. So thanks to Pilot Proficiency, a simulator company based at Chicago Executive Airport, I borrowed their Frasca simulator with a G1000 to test it out. I had a slightly different experience. The distance to my destination did not change, but when using the cumulative mileage, it did show an increase of 30 miles to the flight plan. And that all happened when I loaded the approach. As for when an approach to an airport with a specific initial approach point is selected, the GPS merely adds up each leg, including the one to the airport prior to the waypoints you'll fly to. That drives, in this case, the incremental 24 miles I referenced earlier. Once you activate the approach, it will just add up the mileage from your present position to each of the waypoints listed in the flight plan, ending at the runway. So how do you avoid this issue? I think it starts with not loading an approach that is vector to final. That also helps when you're flying IFR and you get cleared for an approach to an initial approach fix. Because vectors to final only has the final approach fix, if that happens, you'll find yourself having to scramble at the last moment when you could have loaded the approach with all the fixes included. The other piece is understanding how the flight plan page displays information and to always remain situationally aware of where you are in the trip and where you're going. There can be a difference between a loaded approach and an activated approach, so stay on top of that. Being situationally aware will always be your best friend. I hope this was helpful and educational, and I'm interested to hear about other gotchas that you've encountered. This channel is all about helping each other. And by the way, if you do like what we're providing here, please subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. Regardless, thanks for flying with me, and until next time, blue skies and tailwinds.